Hello, welcome everybody. I am super excited about today's conversation. I have somebody who I hold in high regard, highly respect. He is a professional. He's a title representative with Fidelity National Title. He is also a cryptocurrency enthusiast, and he holds a webinar every week with the Anderson Business Advisors. And I'm sure he'll share what that is about. So please help me welcome Grant Luna. How you
Thank
doing,
you,
buddy?
Phillip. Yeah. How's it going?
Doing good. Thank you for doing this, my man.
Of course. Yeah.
So, Grant, the purpose behind putting this together today is obviously cryptocurrency is in the zeitgeist. We hear it everywhere. You can't get around without hearing about it. It doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. It almost feels like it's growing exponentially.
Mhm.
And yet, there's a lot of us, including myself, who sort of have a vague idea of what it's about, but not fully, right?
Mhm.
And so I wanted to just have a conversation around that. And if you can enlighten us to, what is cryptocurrency and, what's its goal and what is it about? What
Mhm.
can you share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess I could start a little bit about background in terms of how I got into it initially and what I do
Yeah,
with
that'd be
those
great.
webinars. But yeah, so I got into it, I'd say a few years back pretty heavily, but was always kind of interested in a way beforehand. But it was one of those things of just curiosity. So come from a real estate background, like you said, and studied political science a lot in college as well. And kind of combined those two, I guess, in interests and started learning a little bit about Bitcoin, especially. And got really interested, but kind of at a time where it really wasn't as mainstream, I think, as it is now. So, uh, kind of got pushed back, I think, from people in my life and friends and family when I started talking about this Bitcoin thing and stuff like that. But uh, really enjoyed learning about it, and I think it's really cool. And hopefully, I can share a little bit more about that today. And
Yeah.
like you mentioned, those webinars. So I would say mostly I'm interested in Bitcoin, but have an understanding of other cryptocurrencies that I can share today. But then also really help people with like the technical sides of cryptocurrency, because I think that's a big thing, and I think that's what stops a lot of people from getting into it is using it themselves. Because I think a lot of people hear the horror stories of people losing all this money and having things hacked, and I totally understand that fear. And I had the same thing, and I grew up using computers heavily and consider myself tech savvy, but had that same fear. So a lot of those webinars, I help people with that and how to use these wallets, exchanges, and something we can talk a little bit more about today as well.
Cool. Yeah, and one of the things I forgot to mention is um, how it kind of will all intersect with real estate, or is intersecting with real estate, and
Mhm.
you being entitled, and what's your feedback also on that? If at some point we can have a conversation about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely, we can. Yeah.
Cool. So tell me about just the fundamentals of cryptocurrency. Where did it come from? What's its purpose? Why is what's going on?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess starting out where it came from, I enjoy learning like history and kind of geek out on those things, and I think it
Yeah,
helps
yeah.
me understand more of like the point of it, of knowing where it came from. But kind of learning about Bitcoin, you kind of learn that like Bitcoin itself wasn't necessarily like the first thing. I think it's like the first big thing that people hear of, but uh, there was this community of people called like the cypherpunks, is what they kind of call themselves, and these are people interested in things like cryptography and uh, just creating, I guess, forms of privacy for individuals. So they kind of saw the onset of like the computer and the internet as things that could provide a lot of really cool resources just for like private citizens and individuals. But they also saw the potential threats of surveillance or privacy threats. So they really try to create forms of technology, and most of them we use today with encryption and email and
Right.
website services that we use. But a big thing that they tried to do for a while was trying to create some form of digital cash at the same time. They saw that obviously we had paper cash that we could use, and it's great and anonymous, and it works pretty well. But online, it's obviously now pretty easily to track a lot of the things that we're doing using money online. So for why they try to create various forms of digital currencies, and there were different forms even before Bitcoin was created, and most of them failed for different reasons, either like a technical reason or they were reliant on like central companies to run these things. So it was dependent on a small group that had the entire control over the project. And so Bitcoin kind of changed all of that in 2008. So I'm sure most people might have heard a little bit of the background as of now, but there's kind of this email chain within that same group of people, the cypherpunks, where they kind of just keep talking about different ideas and projects. And then this figure named Satoshi Nakamoto went to that group and released something called a white paper, which is basically like this research proposal saying, hey, I have this idea. If you guys want, you could look at it, critique it, and maybe if you have any interest, we could work on this together. And that was the Bitcoin white paper, and basically released this proposal for creating a new form of digital cash that was peer-to-peer without a reliance on a third party. Essentially, peer-to-peer meaning it's just this big network of computers that are connected together that are all running the same network, and that was the Bitcoin network. So that's kind of the early days of how it started, and these were just people that were interested in the project and didn't have a price associated with it for a long time, for a few years, and people just were really interested and started transacting. And you could literally go to like websites and enter in like that CAPTCHA, like you do on certain websites to prove you're
Yeah,
not a
yeah,
robot,
yeah,
and you
yeah,
could
yeah.
get like 50 Bitcoin just literally for free for entering the CAPTCHA.
Wow.
But kind of over time, just kept developing, and people started getting interest. And I guess in terms of the interest, that's kind of where it connects to what the point of it is. And in terms of Bitcoin, because cryptocurrency came a little bit later, the idea of cryptocurrency as the whole market that exists. Bitcoin itself, I think, started in a simple sense of, like I said, being a form of money, of digital money that's outside of government or central bank control, right? So
Right.
that's the big thing in terms of the actual network, the Bitcoin network. But then also there's the asset with it too, and I think that's an important distinguishing thing for people in understanding Bitcoin. Is there's kind of two things when you say Bitcoin. There's the network, which is, like I said, comprised of these computers that are connected together. Then there's
Mhm.
also the asset, that token that exists on the network. And so they had this network that couldn't be controlled or stopped or shut down or manipulated by any like government or group of corporations. But then you had that token itself, which had a fixed supply of 21 million Bitcoin. And that's something that can't be changed. So kind of these two factors really did create a lot of interest for people early on that had certain leanings, economically and politically, and saw some issues with governments. And I think that's also kind of the interesting context in which Bitcoin itself was launched. So Bitcoin was launched in 2009. So this is kind of on the heels of the financial crisis, and people
Right.
saw things going on with the banks and the bailouts, and a lot of people that were frustrated with essentially the people that they thought were responsible for the financial crisis in a way being bailed out for those actions. So uh, kind of on the back of that, Bitcoin really started to be developed. So I think that's the main point of Bitcoin. And then you have other cryptocurrencies that started being developed a little bit later on, in the sense of looking at Bitcoin and seeing that it had cool applications and being this form of money that can't be shut down or controlled or inflated, I think is another thing. They also saw that there was a few limitations in what it could do in terms of programming, and they maybe wanted to apply it to different things. So more complex operations, and that's where you have like the Ethereums and Solanas and Cardanos that people have heard of, that are
Yeah.
trying to like launch applications and do NFTs and all these bells and whistles. Not something that myself I'm as interested in, but that would say the general point of Bitcoin. But in terms of like the purpose, I think maybe the last year or so, people might be seeing the need for something like Bitcoin now, especially where you look at situations like in Turkey with their currency collapsing, or even here in the U.S. and having our own currency being created in large amounts, or now
Right.
Canada having payments censored and bank accounts potentially censored, and having
Right.
some form of money that we have more control over.
Yeah. It's interesting when you mentioned 2009. I mean, that's not that long ago. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, geez, it's only a couple, like a decade ago. And for it to be as strong as it is, it's really interesting. Now, you mentioned that there's 21 million of them. Is that part of the reason why the price is kind of skyrocketed, because there's a limited amount of it and more people have um, gravitated towards it? Or, I
Yeah, I
mean,
think that's like a initial like driving force of it. So you have people kind of looking in like this current, I guess, last couple of years, and looking at the things the Federal Reserve is doing in a way of creating essentially trillions of dollars to prop up things like the stock market, and kind of bail out companies in a different way.
yeah,
And you have these companies that are probably holding a lot of dollars on their balance sheet or whatever it is, and don't want that to lose value. So they're looking for areas where they can place that money and not have it lose its value, right? Because if you hold it in dollars, you're essentially having most of that value eaten away. So
right.
kind of the fixed amount of 21 million, kind of like real estate, right? There's a fixed amount of real estate now that you know very well, and that
Yeah,
creates a lot of price pressure upwards. So kind of the same thing with Bitcoin.
interesting. Cool. Cool. You mentioned, for people that are interested in getting into cryptocurrency, what you mentioned some of the hesitation. What well, let me reframe that. What are some of the hesitations that you hear people have?
Hmm.
And for people that are thinking about getting into it, what are some of the steps that they need to take in order to
Yeah,
do that?
totally. I think there's a lot of hesitations that I experience when I like talk to people about it initially. I think first would be like the technical sides of things. I think people think because it's so easy just to like hear the news articles, right? And they
Right.
see these very negative stories, and obviously those things can happen. But I think people get initially scared of their own technical ability to have a cryptocurrency wallet or manage an exchange account or whatever it is. I think there's also hesitancy on the volatility of it, which is understandable because Bitcoin itself, as people have probably seen, the price fluctuates a lot. You know, a couple of months ago it was at $63,000. Now it's at 40,000, and yesterday it was at 43,000. Right, and I think that's another thing that creates hesitancy in people. And I think those two factors, at least in my opinion, are something that can be overblown or is overblown a lot, I think.
Mhm.
And kind of connects to that other question you asked, like, what are some things people can do? So I think the first thing is kind of have some sense of, or I guess your own sense of like risk tolerance, right? Like, what is your sense of being able to handle some fluctuations with the price of Bitcoin? And with that, kind of come with a frame of mind of how much money do you actually want to invest, right? Because if you kind of see it as basically you're putting your money in this kind of riskier asset class, then those price fluctuations don't hurt you as much, especially if you don't necessarily have an understanding of it yet, right? Where
Right.
even early on when I was investing in Bitcoin, I was terrified at the price movements and all these things because I didn't
Yeah.
really understand what Bitcoin was, how it worked, or anything like that. So I think that's a big thing is having an own sense of your own financial situation and be like, okay, is this money that I'm going to need a month from now or 2 months from now? Because if it is, you know, maybe that's not the best idea to put it in something like cryptocurrency, because I know it can be appealing to see the big stories of people making 1,000
Yeah.
times returns and all these things, and that fear of missing out, I think is a really strong motivator for sure. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend people like put some serious money in there unless they have an understanding of it. Is probably the first step, and then I think the second thing is like time commitment as well in terms of how much time are you willing to like dedicate towards learning how these things actually work on a technical level. Because unfortunately I do see a lot of people really taken advantage of, uh, because how I think deeply embedded behind jargon and complex like technical stuff and computer terminology and all these things, and I'm still every day like trying to learn new things. I think it's very easy at that same time to take advantage of people that are trusting and take advantage of those people and say, oh, this is a good sounding project, and it's kind of essentially just like a scam, you know. So I think if you're have that sense of your own ability to dedicate time to learning, but if you just want to maybe just try it out a little bit, then I recommend just something like Bitcoin, right, which itself is probably the safest bet out of any of them.
Got it. Okay, so when you reference some of the riskier moves are more when you try out these other types of cryptocurrencies.
Mm-hmm.
So you mean so are there cryptocurrencies that have come on the market that don't have the value that they supposedly have? Is that sort of the premise?
100%. Yeah.
Got it.
And I guess
Okay.
like to expand a little bit more, I kind of like what helps me understand the whole market in general. I kind of
Sure.
view like Bitcoin is kind of in a class of its own, right? Bitcoin is kind of this digital form of money, and that's all
Yeah.
it's trying to be. And it's very secure relative to other cryptocurrencies and
Hmm.
has a scarcity embedded in it. It has the fact that no one can control it or shut it down or manipulate it or change it. Uh,
Hmm.
then you kind of have these other cryptocurrencies, and they're all kind of lumped in this cryptocurrency bucket now, which I think is
Yeah.
unfortunate because people I think approach the whole space with that lens. But I
Hmm.
think most of the other ones you have like Ethereum and Cardano and Solana, which are probably like the other three big ones at this point. I think are
Okay.
good to kind of view as like startup tech stocks, you know, because
Got it.
these are smaller projects where people have a large amount of control over the projects and can change the amounts of the token or change how the things are going to operate. So if you kind of approach it with that, where it's not necessarily going to be this form of money as it's claiming to be, but a tech stock, then treat it as if you would treat any startup company, right? And if you really believe in that startup, then it's okay, but there's a high probability that these startup companies aren't going to work out. And then the further you go down the rabbit hole of cryptocurrencies, then you're right, like you said, where there's really not much value in these things, but it's very easy to manipulate the market with them.
Now, is there a resource that beginners can um, do their own research? Is there like what is somebody
Mhm.
who's just starting? Where do they go and find some of this information from? I mean, I'm sure Google can help
Mhm.
out, but like, what other resources do people have?
Yeah, and that's like the tough part is like the internet is great because it gives so much information, but then it's so hard to decide like what is good
Right.
information, right? And
Yeah,
it's
the
like
credibility part of it is difficult, right? Because
it is.
again, it's only 9 years, 10 years, 12 years old. I
Mhm.
mean, there's still a whole lot of credibility that needs to be placed into this industry.
Big
So,
time. Yeah, you're
how do
right.
you, how do you decipher? Where do you go to?
Mhm.
Can you share some of the places you go to find this information? Or
Yeah, for sure. So I guess in my like journey of learning about it, I really
yeah,
just focus on learning about Bitcoin and like how it just works mechanically, and like,
okay,
and from there I recommend, and I could send you a bunch of these links and books.
okay,
But there's a website called like the Nakamoto Institute itself, which is this website that has just a bunch of information about how Bitcoin works on a technical level, or the actual like behind the scenes history of Bitcoin and stuff like that. So you learn more about it, because that kind of helps you, I think, sniff out a little bit of the scamminess or other projects that exist in the space.
hmm
Um, but then I also don't, I always kind of don't buy into like the YouTubers online that are saying
mm
like, oh, Bitcoin's going to go to $200,000 tomorrow, or this coin's
mm.
going to go to 50,000 tomorrow. Put your money in now. I just steer as clear away from those as possible, because those people tend to be kind of paid by those smaller projects to like basically promote those, and they get a lot of kickbacks. Um, so that's the kind of the unfortunate thing right now is it really is kind of this wild west of the space.
Right. That's exactly what I thought about. I go,
Mhm.
wow. I mean, because the access, right? Like everybody has access to it. Like, and when I say access, everybody can create a YouTube channel,
Mhm.
right? And anybody can create a story,
Mhm.
right? Like behind anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's hard
Yeah.
for the credibility factor to kick
Mhm.
in. But
Big time.
so
And like
interesting.
even me, right? Like I, for
Yeah.
all people know, and that's why I always say like I always tell people, even when people come to me like a lot in my life now and like will ask for advice, and I just tell people like just like try to learn as much as you can about it, because then you have the confidence of your own. And even I went through the process of having people I connected with that knew more about Bitcoin than I did, and uh, trusted them for a while. But then even at a certain point, I was like, you know what? I really want to understand this stuff for myself, because I was putting my own money into it as an investment. And
Yeah.
um, I think when I get anxious or fearful about things, I just try to learn more, right? And kind of settle some of those doubts. And
Yeah.
but I'm happy to share some resources with you that you can share
Okay.
with a group that has helped me. But yeah, you're right. I think that's the big thing is, but yeah, the more you learn about it and understand how Bitcoin works, I think but also I guess what's cool, not to go on too much of a tangent, but
No, go for it.
what's really cool about learning about Bitcoin is in a way it kind of forces you to learn about our own financial system and how it operates, because before learning about Bitcoin, I knew absolutely nothing about our own financial system or like what
Mhm.
even money is, right? I think it's kind of a silly thing to think about, but like before Bitcoin, I never was like, oh, what is money, or what makes this valuable, and what makes some
Mhm.
monies, why is the dollar worth more than this currency, and how did the dollar even end up this powerful currency, and all these things. So, uh, if anything, if people don't even go down the cryptocurrency rabbit hole, I think what's good about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies is it kind of shed light on some of the ways the current financial system is structured. And I think that's a really good thing to learn about in itself. So
Yep.
uh, that's kind of
That's a
the
rabbit hole in itself, right? To some degree.
big
I
time.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
kind of what I was saying of like time, like the ability for people to dedicate time to this, because I'm kind of lucky in the sense I don't have like a ton of huge responsibilities. So I did have time to read all this stuff and watch all these things and listen to all these things. But if you don't have a lot of time to get it dedicated to like just obsessively looking into cryptocurrency markets, you're just going to be kind of riding the back end wave of a lot of manipulation on the smaller cryptocurrencies. So if people are interested, that's why I recommend just stick to like Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? And just put some
Yeah.
money in there that you can afford to play around with and get started, and get comfortable with the mechanics of it.
So do you see it as a long play, pretty much? You know, just a kind of like you mentioned the stock market where you invest in it, and I guess what's the end game for?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't want to get into your personal reason, but like,
Mm-hmm.
what for the average person that invests into cryptocurrencies? Is it just an investment? platform
Mhm.
that at some point, just like if I went to the bank and they had a 3% CD for
Mhm.
6 months, 12 months. So is it that kind of is that the approach that we should be taking, or because the other thing that I see is like, for instance, I'll go to the gas station now, and you see the ATM and it says
Mhm.
Bitcoin in it, right? So
Mhm.
now it's kind of like it's turning into like you almost can use the currency,
Mhm.
or at least I feel that way. I'm by the way, I'm super ignorant. I don't know if you can or not, so
Mhm.
I sound silly here.
No, you're
But I'm
good.
just thinking like I'm seeing when I see that kind of stuff, I'm like, okay, so what's happening here? Am I able to take out money if I have cryptocurrency, or so
Mhm.
what's so I see those as two different things. One's an investment, but one's actual currency that I can use.
Mhm. Yeah.
What's the take on that? What's
Yeah. And that's what's like, I think tough is it is kind of hard, I think, for a lot of people to like have a sense of like, what is this thing? And even sometimes I waver of like going back and forth and my own vision of it. Right. But I think initially right now it is kind of like a speculative investment in a way, right? You're kind of
okay?
banking on the potential for this thing to have wider adoption in the future. But in terms of Bitcoin, I think you did have a good analogy of like a CD or like a bond or like real estate or something that you just kind of play the super long game with it, because it is a very long-term outlook in terms of Bitcoin's adoption. But Bitcoin itself is just, like I said, trying to be some form of money that is outside of the state, but itself it's trying to be money, right? And um, for how I guess money generally gets adopted, it kind of has to go through these phases of, like you said, proving its ability to like maintain value, right? Before people
Right,
will actually exchange it for goods and services, right? Before you will accept Bitcoin for a real estate transaction as commission, you want to make sure that that Bitcoin is going to be able to hold its value longer than a week, right?
right,
So I think as more and more people adopt Bitcoin around the world, uh, the price of it will stabilize over time, right? And then more people might be willing to like accept actual goods and services for it. So I guess that's the general play that people are interested in Bitcoin are doing right now. But you kind of see it happening globally right now, where El Salvador has taken it on as legal tender there, and the government itself has put Bitcoin on its balance sheet. And I think you'll probably see countries that probably are one more heavily reliant on like remittance payments, so people sending money back to their family overseas, then because Bitcoin itself completely undermines things like Western Union, which takes a few days and takes 10 to 20% of these transactions. And Bitcoin, you can do the same thing in a matter of minutes for a couple of dollars or cents even. So I think those countries that one have had those situations, a lot of remittances, but then also two at the same time, um, don't have pretty reliable like local currencies or government currencies themselves, or might have been kind of put in bad situations through things like the International Monetary Fund or the U.S. government or whatever it is that might take a chance on it beforehand. But then other cryptocurrencies, like I said, are kind of like these tech stocks and should be seen more as like these short-term plays. So I think if you are going to create a cryptocurrency portfolio, treat Bitcoin, like you said, as a CD with an interest rate that you can hold long-term and don't worry about the price for 5 years, right? These other
yeah,
ones more actively manage them.
okay, got it. Now the $1 million question is, how does real estate and cryptocurrency eventually connect? And I've heard, and we haven't even brought this term up, and we can have this conversation on another one of these, but the blockchain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or some, and I've heard that uh, to some degree, title at some point could be held on a blockchain, or something like that, or
Yeah, I think that's been something talked about, and that's still something I'm not necessarily sold on.
okay,
Because that's the tough thing is like it's a new technology, so like all these wild ideas get thrown out, and it's
okay,
still hard.
okay, good, good, good. See, that's why I
But
like to talk to you, because you bring sanity back into to our world. Because I was like,
uh,
no, because I hear these things, I'm like, that
yeah,
kind of, and the thing about it, they say it with so much confidence that
uh-huh.
I'm like, that sounds like a good idea.
That guy sounds confident. Yeah.
Yeah, hey, that's where we're
No, I
headed.
understand.
So,
Yeah,
but
for
yeah,
sure.
okay,
But in terms of real estate,
yeah,
so you mentioned the blockchain, and I think what helped me understand the blockchain a lot is like coming from real estate, and in a way, the blockchain itself is kind of replicating like the Federal Reserve settlement system. So like in real estate transaction, when people wire the money, that's going through the Federal Reserve in terms of settling this giant transfer of whatever it is, $400,000 from this party to this party on their bank ledger, right? So
right,
that's what the Federal Reserve is doing, and we're trusting the Federal Reserve to do that. And we have paid them a fee to do that, whatever it is to wire that money, $35.
Yeah.
So the Bitcoin blockchain, for example, is in a way just kind of replicating the Federal Reserve's settlement of that value, right? But just in a decentralized way. So instead of trusting a central bank like the Federal Reserve, it's this like giant collection of, like I said, tens of thousands of people globally that are running this software.
Okay.
So in a way, it's kind of just creating a new form of like a settlement layer, right? And uh, that's always helped me understand it, because on top of the Federal Reserve, you have these transaction layers that are built up and stuff like that, and Bitcoin's in a way trying to replicate that. So what's different, I'd say, about the Bitcoin settlement layer versus the Federal Reserve, which is what real estate uses now, is there really aren't like time limitations on the Bitcoin settlement, right? So with the Federal Reserve, if you try to process a wire at 4 p.m. on Friday, right, it's like, oh, we can't do that. Sorry, you have to wait till Monday, and your buyers now have to pay interest on that, and issues that emerge. But with Bitcoin, you can do that, right, Saturday at midnight, right, and settle a large transaction, because there is large amounts of liquidity that exists now within Bitcoin. So you could settle hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars worth of value on that. So I do think there might be like somewhat in the near future, if certain, I'd say Bitcoin as it continues to adopt, maybe there is a world where that is used for actual settlement of like real estate transactions, right? And you can settle large amounts of value. But then there just comes the issues of like insurance and how do you play this part in escrow and title and these things. But I think that's the big thing, is seeing Bitcoin itself as kind of like a store of value first, right? Where you can actually settle large amounts of transactions globally. Because right now, that's kind of what countries and companies are reliant on. They're relying on like the Federal Reserve, right, to transfer all of this value, and we trust all of what they're going to do with that. So that's kind of the main thing. But then also you have, not to go too into like the weeds with it, but you have these things called like stable coins, which are kind of like synthetic versions of the dollar, which always like will maintain roughly around like $1 worth of value. So that does open up like possibilities for doing loans and stuff like that, and synthetic versions of dollars and stuff like that, to like essentially eliminate friction in real estate transactions, because I think there's just a lot of friction in how real estate can be done right now, with time delays and people and a lot of issues that can come up. So I think that's probably going to be the main thing. But I guess even before then, I've been hearing more so about people being able to use their cryptocurrency as like collateral to receive a loan. And that's probably going to be way before anything I just said beforehand, of someone having Bitcoin and they can go to a provider like BlockFi, which is a major company that offers collateralized loans, and you could put up some of your Bitcoin as collateral, and they can provide a loan on the back end and give you dollars, so you can go buy real estate and pay that off, obviously in dollars, but mostly use it as kind of an asset now.
Okay, so let's say you can give them 20% Bitcoin. They'll give you the money. You can use that towards putting a down payment on a house.
Exactly, yeah. And some
That's
of
what's
them
happening.
even,
What is the name of the company?
oh, so they don't do the full loan on the house yet. So it's called
Right.
BlockFi is one of them. Another one is
BlockFi.
Ledn.io, LEDN period IO.
Okay.
What they'll allow you to do is, put up some cryptocurrency as collateral, and they can give you the down payment money, right? Because it's still very early on, where most lenders aren't even going to be allowing you to do the down payment in cryptocurrency. So it's still very early, but they'll give you money for these down payments and stuff. And because I think as mainstream as it is, it's still very speculative, right? The entire space. And a lot of clarification is still coming in terms of regulations with the government and governments around the world and how they're going to treat these things.
How far do you think we are time wise? I mean, speculating here. I know I'm not going to hold you to it, but just before we get to that part in our world where we can have those transactions directly with crypto.
I think the U.S. is probably like the furthest away from it from most countries, to be honest. Like when I think
Furthest
about it,
away?
Yeah, I think just because the U.S. has the least amount of need for it, I think.
Right.
As strange as it sounds, because
yeah, that makes sense.
we do have a currency that works well, like the dollar works, it's globally accepted, it maintains its value well. So I think we'll probably see more so Bitcoin being adopted in places where it's necessary first, like El Salvador, places like Turkey now, where the currency is just collapsing, or places where there's a lot of political instability and suppression, whatever it is, right? That's where you'll see Bitcoin really being used first, because they need to use it. So most people can go to Chase and open a bank account, and their money is going to be pretty safe there, and it'll maintain its value relatively well. And also the dollar obviously has a lot of power globally, right? So there's a lot more for it to lose if it does allow cryptocurrency more. But so maybe you might see some states allow it for things like I know Arizona passed or is trying to pass legislation to allow it to be like actual legal tender. I saw another legislation recently that is talking about reducing some of the tax implications of spending Bitcoin for transactions or cryptocurrency for transactions. So maybe 5 to 10 years might get a little easier in the U.S. But like I said, I think the U.S. will be one of the last ones. But maybe
Yeah,
I'm
and that
wrong on
makes
that.
sense. Yeah, the
Yeah.
dollar. I mean, the powers that be will
Mhm.
probably have a harder time letting go of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of control with it.
Yeah,
That's the big thing. But I think it's just important to have a sense of how it works, and because I think we are going to probably move towards. And I think maybe before cryptocurrency is allowed here, we'll see definitely like something like a central bank digital currency, which is something that's been talked a lot. And I know China's already rolling out a digital yuan. India is talking about rolling out a digital bank currency as well, and the Federal Reserve has already been talking about trying to develop a central bank digital currency, which in essence would be on a mechanical level not really different than what already exists, right? Money in
right.
bank accounts is digital, but it just has the fancy name. But with that, you have the ability, right, of a lot more control over the money that we have. And I don't think it's that far out to see a future in the near future where cash is kind of an old thing that we don't really have access to as much anymore. I think
Yeah,
some stat where like 92% of the world's currency is already digital. And I think having some form of money that is still kind of serving as cash, right, that you can have and have private control over and access over is very important. And I guess something I didn't bring up when I should have earlier about like how people might get started if just they're interested would be kind of look into how exchanges work, right? So even if it's just as simple as creating a Coinbase account, which is a major cryptocurrency exchange, or Kraken is another major cryptocurrency exchange.
so
Uh,
Coinbase and Kraken.
those are two big ones,
Okay,
yeah. Or Cash App. So people have Cash App already. That's
okay,
another really great app which you could easily buy Bitcoin on your phone.
okay,
I don't really recommend Robinhood because you can actually send it to your own private wallet. It's kind of just like an IOU. But
okay.
I recommend people just create like a Coinbase account and just buy like a couple of dollars worth just to see how that works, right? And just get used to the mechanics. And that way, if it does ever become a situation where maybe it's a more prescient issue here that maybe we need to look at alternative forms of currency, you already have the account set up, you know how it works. And then also like get used to like having an own cryptocurrency wallet on your phone or laptop, right? And practice sending $5 from your Coinbase account to your wallet, right? Because that's actually how you take ownership of it. It's kind of like actually going to an ATM and taking the money out of the bank and you have the money in your hand. It's kind of what having a cryptocurrency wallet means.
Is there a fee for transactions like
Mm-hmm.
that? There is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're kind of like if I send Bitcoin to you
Yeah.
or to myself, I'm paying a transaction to the miners. I'm sure people have heard of like the miners that are processing the transactions behind the scene.
Got it. Okay. Man, brother, this was a lot to digest. This was really good. Thank you for sharing that. Your webinar. I don't know if it's open to the public or not. Is it? Is that kind of stuff or not really?
So that one isn't, but I'm also happy like if you ever want it or if people have interest in it to do like one with you and people that are interested and show people how these exchanges work and how to
Yeah.
do like a wallet and stuff and walk them through the process. And that's a hard part is giving like an overview and all these things.
Yeah.
But I'm always happy to like share information because the worst thing I want is for people to go into this thing and feel like they got completely scammed or burnt and just never come back to it, right? Because I was lucky enough to have really helpful people that helped me with it, and I want to be able to do the same.
Yeah, I got to say that you said you got into it a few years ago, which, man, that that's a gamble, right? Like you're
Mhm.
sort of having faith in something that you don't know where it's going, which is really interesting.
Big time.
What prompted you to take that direction? Like just
Yeah.
on something so not something that I don't know from an outsider looking in. Now, I mean, obviously, now I feel a lot more confident, obviously, because I see it.
Mhm.
Even hearing you talk about it, now I feel like okay, maybe I should look into it, right?
Mhm.
But when no one's talking about it, what prompted you to just take a chance on something like that?
Yeah, it was like I guess it was a phase where it's just like really like open to a lot and learning more things and kind of getting outside my comfort zone a little bit, and that led me to like learning about Bitcoin, and it was something I'd heard about, but I think I was just really convinced by it in a way, like because I guess I'm the type of person like I just get really obsessive over things in short periods of time and just like consume like a ton of information about it. So we're just learning a ton about how Bitcoin worked, and then like I said, learning about our own financial system and these things. And at a certain point, I just like was really convinced that it was going to be like a big thing in the future, and that it couldn't be like stopped in a way. Like I kind of view Bitcoin and its design in a way. It's like it is designed itself, Bitcoin, to be able to survive like any attack that might come its way, whether that be like governments, essentially. But then I guess just like wanting to like I guess be a little risky as well with my own investments, because I was young and had the opportunity to I guess put some money in, and I guess also I was starting to get into investing a little bit on my own. And I remember meeting with like a financial advisor and giving my money to someone at like Wells Fargo or something like that, and I guess feeling a little bit like disheartened by that process. Like I didn't like the feeling of like not having control over my own investment and my own money, and was a little off put by like I don't know, just traditional ways of saving money or investments in stocks, and not knowing how any of that stuff worked, I think was a big thing. And what was appealing to me about Bitcoin was it is a form of money or savings that will actually hopefully go up over time, but also I have more control over and understanding over. Because I think the traditional world of finance to me is just, I think it's almost like confusing by design in a way. And if you like, the more you look into it, and it seems like for the average person, you have to rely on a lot of these wealth managers or these things that are so detached from, I guess, just normal reality, especially in San Pedro. When I went to school on the East Coast, I was surrounded by people that would eventually work in Wall Street, and seeing all these circles and was something that never appealed to me. So I guess Bitcoin was something that was kind of outside of that circle in a way. But also, a little rebellious streak, I guess, too. So when people would tell me, like,
San Pedro,
that, I was like, I have to do it now.
That's good. That's good. Well, Grant, thank you for your time, brother. I really, really appreciate this. I know that a lot of great information for me, and I know that whoever watches this, because I'm going to share with a lot of my network, and I know that there's a lot of us who are not as informed, and yet it's here, right? Like it's not going anywhere, and so I would like in the future, because I know this thing is going to evolve and it's going to continue to grow as as we get more information, and you yourself evolve as well, and myself, then maybe we can have more of these, and whatever the latest updates are and changes that we see happening, if you can stop by, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you ever want to do like a Zoom with people that are interested and ask questions, or people have questions, we can always hop on one of these, because I appreciate you and want to be gracious with my time to you, because how much you always help me as well. So awesome. Always happy to continue this and help people understand.
Cool. Well, thank you, brother. I'll see you.
Yeah, thanks, Phillip. Have a good one, man.
Bye.